I'm not going to give you an inspirational thing about, oh, I have all this work and yet I managed to be super focused with my training and I never miss a. That's not true. I do miss sessions. I hate missing sessions. I try to make up, but I don't take it too seriously because we are older guys now. The younger guys are doing, we have to have fun with what we're doing. Yes, we like to race hard. Yes, we like to win. Yes, we like to beat the young guys. That's the biggest one, right? Don't get frustrated by not being able to train as much as the other guys. Because what happens is that we get so mentally screwed. You're on Instagram, you're on Facebook. Oh my God, Venky's done 6 hours. How am I going to race against him, next weekend? Oh, he's been doing 6-hour days that's just going to mess with you, right?
Yeah.
You do what you can do. Forget about the others, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes people will train more than you and they will win. Sometimes they'll train more than you and you will win. And, all of this happens. So don't worry about it. Just look at your own balance. And then I realized oh my God, this I've done only on nutrition, right? With minimal riding next to it. This is very powerful. So that's when a penny really dropped. And I think that what's happened over time is, we always say, right? And I'm sure you say this as a coach, consistency is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Right? In cycling, you need to be consistent. I have never managed to be consistent with my cycling, even though I say that to everybody that I mentor because of life.
Yeah.
Right? I can't. Things get thrown at you. But I've maintained consistency with nutrition. That was really massive because India was now competing on the world stage, right? It's not the UCI, it's not the Pro Tour, but still in a field of riders from all over the world with organized teams and making an impression. And we won. We won the juniors, right? Naveen Raj came back with the gold.
I am KYNKYNY and this is the Working Athlete Podcast. Here I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, time management and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future episodes. Today's guest is one of the pioneers of Bangalore cycling and Indian cycling, in my opinion. He was founder of the first professional cycling team in India. And to this day, it has been impossible to replicate the model and the success of the team. He's one of the strongest masters riders we have in the country as well. His versatility is mind-boggling. He has donned many hats over the years: a son, a husband, a doting dad, a designer, a business owner, a cycling team founder, a plant-based nutrition evangelist, a kick-ass masters rider, a lecturer, or just a few of them. And he has excelled in all of them. His name is Vivek Radhakrishnan. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast, Vivek. It is such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Venky.
All right. So let's talk about your latest passion of nutrition and Happy Healthy Me Organics. It has started, it has got into sports nutrition as well, right? Let's start by talking about that a bit.
Yeah. So it's funny, all the things that you mentioned before, all of the different things that I did, some of which I'm still doing, quite a few of those. They've all kind of worked their way and culminated in the nutrition direction. So actually, the brand Happy Healthy Me's was founded in 2016 by my wife Namu and her co-partner at the time, Misha, and it was really focused on organics and on food. And really looking at a healthy lifestyle and providing people with with something that they know is really truly organic, right? Because that's how the brand was founded, because people didn't know, am I actually buying organic or not? So the idea was to let's create a certified organic brand. And it was one of the pioneering organic brands in the country at the time. And I got roped into the company at some point. I was working with Specialized in the industry, in the bike industry, and Namu said she really wanted me to join, and so I joined, and I started helping out with various things, business development, operations, all this kind of stuff. But what I noticed happening over time was that we were attracting more and more athletes, largely because of our range of superfoods, which was also one of the first brands in the country to have that kind of range of superfoods at the time. And more and more athletes were coming to us. And so that became something very interesting. At the same time, we ran a cafe, and I was running the cafe. And what started to happen is the whole cafe would be full of athletes, predominantly football players, from the Bangalore football, BFC, Bangalore football. And
nice.
yeah, and these are hungry guys. Huh? They're all, it was all the Australian, Spanish, all the foreign players, some of the Indian players. They all were, customers of the brand. And then they would come and eat there. I was cooking for them at the time. So they would like clean out the place. There'd be no food left. And so all of this started becoming very interesting, because not only are you starting to have them as customers, now you're actually feeding them as well and seeing what they eat and how they eat. And then you get into relationships with them because they're also buying food to take home. And for me, things really started aligning at that point. If I throw back to, I can't remember the years, but I guess maybe 2013, 14, probably 2014. Our team at the time, the SKCT, the Specialized KYNKYNY cycling team, we were sponsored by Scratch Labs. And one of the founders, Biju Thomas, he flew down to India to do some work with us. And that was also really a revelation, because we really started then to think hard about hydration, nutrition, and looking at it differently from how sports nutrition is typically looked at, in a much more real way, real food. So that experience, that had kind of launched my interest in nutrition, right? For riding, for sports. Right. And now suddenly I was in the kitchen and I had hungry athletes waiting. And so then it took that direction. Suddenly, not only do I love cooking for myself and my family, but now I was cooking for them. And eventually we took the brand into a direction where we thought, okay, let's really look at food, nourishment for athletes. And that's where we're at now. And that's our focus. And like I said, much of our audience was looking at superfoods. So we now have a range of performance superfoods. So these are products that have been developed with superfoods that work on immunity, they work on providing energy, they help with recovery, different products, which are largely made of superfoods. So now Happy Healthy Me is like a performance superfood brand. Awesome. And it's an exciting space to be in.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when did this journey start? When did you start cycling?
Oh, the cycling journey. So it's funny because, there was a time, especially when we launched the team, when we had a lot of press, right? We were in newspapers, in magazines, all sorts of things. So I did a lot of interviews then, because of course I was leading the whole PR side of it, right? Marketing, which was a big side of it. And of course this question came up. And I remember the first time it came up, I sat and thought about it. And then I realized what became my standard answer is that actually I never stopped. So I started cycling like you and like everybody as a kid, right? Yeah. On my I remember I had this little red bike. It was called Paprika. And so I had that. And then I remember I got my first big bike, which was a BSA SLR. And that was really moving up, right, to a real bike. And then that bike got modified into a road bike. So I used to spend every summer in France because my mom is French and my family's there. And I would come back with parts from Decathlon, which has existed it's a French brand, right? It's existed there forever. Yeah. And I would bring back parts every year and keep building this bike till it finally one day looked like a road bike. I remember bringing back spray paint also from there, cans of spray paint. Wow. So actually what happened is the cycling never stopped. Um, I think when I started going to high school,
Hmm.
I would ride to school,
Right.
and so that was like a 12-kilometer commute one way.
Hmm.
And in that school, like the thought of cycling to school was insane, right? Like people are like, "Are you mad? What are you doing? I mean, who does that?" And I just loved it so much. There was such a rush. Um, it never got tired. Like so I never stopped. And then after school, um, I went abroad to study, and I went to the Netherlands.
Wow.
So Netherlands, Denmark, I mean, this is like the heart of cycling, right?
Yeah.
So there it kind of took on a new direction. So I was already doing touring over here on
Mm-hmm.
my bike. So I would travel by bicycle. This is before I went abroad when I was still in high school.
Hmm.
And in the Netherlands, I mean, there, of course, you commute that way, right?
Hmm.
But that you don't even really think about that as cycling. That's like you have some rotten old bike and you use that to get from point A to point B. But then I would cycle, after college. And then I started traveling. So I started traveling through Europe by bicycle. And I think that's something that I would advise to. I'm guessing that the audience listening to this podcast is largely the racy, sporty performance crowd. But I have to say to you guys that if you actually travel by bicycle, if you do some touring, it's something so magical and so pure. It's you and your bicycle carrying your stuff. And I remember when I did it, it was just me and my bicycle, and I had my tent, my sleeping bag, my cooking gas, little everything. So I was just a one man traveling thing every night, sleeping in my tent. Um, it's really something remarkable that you experience with cycling, which is completely different from the training that we do, the racing that we do, all of this other stuff. And I think that's when, even though I'd been cycling, for whatever, 18, 20 years till then, that was like a real falling in love. It was a deep love.
Right.
Crossing the Alps, sleeping in the mountains by a river in your tent. I mean, it's just something else. And I think that really cemented things. And I still think it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life, really just traveling on my bike. And after that came all of these other things, getting into racing, looking at the sport. But that was my base training,
All
and
right.
that is base training for life.
That is a solid base. Now I understand where this thing is coming from, right? So let us expand a little bit on the touring. It's very interesting, right? The audience is wide spectrum of people working and cycling, and so I think this would be quite interesting. So you mentioned that you were touring even before going abroad. What sort of touring did you do in India?
So probably the longest ride I did was from Bangalore to Cochin.
Hmm.
And this is 1994, perhaps. I think
Wow.
1994.
Yeah.
Um, so it wasn't, I don't think many people were doing this kind of thing at that time.
Hmm.
I mean, those were the BSA SLR Hero
Right.
Ranger days, right?
Correct.
And so I did that with a couple of my friends. And, it was wonderful. I mean, we did have geared bikes. We had added gears. Like there was gears. It had a Shimano sticker. I don't know. It
Hmm.
must have been Shimano because I don't
Yeah.
think people were like. So we had 5 gears, I remember, and we'd fit these on the bikes ourselves. And man, we knew nothing about tech. We're so
Right.
tech savvy now, right? We're worrying about milligrams and titanium and all of this. And back then, it was just like, okay, so there's this thing that goes through that holds the wheel. So you put this there, and it does something. It makes it easier. It worked, right? And so we traveled like that to Cochin, and it was amazing. I mean, that was also really an eye opener. It was very dangerous. I mean, it's dangerous on the road today, but was very different then, because I remember Mysore Road was a
Yeah.
single, almost a single lane. It was 2 lanes wide,
Right.
and you'd see like demolished trucks along the way as you go. Do you remember this? Like when we were kids and you travel somewhere, you just see these truck carcasses along the way, right?
Yeah.
You don't see
Yeah.
too much anymore. And so a lot of crazy stuff happened back then, but that really gave me the bug to travel by bicycle.
How many days did it take? Do you remember? Bangalore to Kochi.
Not so long. I mean, probably like 5 days or something like that.
Right. Okay.
Um, I don't know if you
Get.
remember, but there was the plague that happened in that year. There was a crazy thing that happened with the plague, right? And it
Uh-huh.
was being spread, and so we got stopped in the forest by the police, and then we got loaded into a truck and sent back where we came from, and then we sneaked out and cycled it again. And it was just madness. But it's adventure, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's something that we miss in racing. We have a
Mm.
lot of cool stuff that happens in racing,
Yeah.
but the adventure is kind of not there. You never know what's going to happen in a race, but
Yeah.
you kind of know what are the sort of things that can happen. When you're
Right.
traveling, you have no idea what's going to happen.
That is
Like,
true.
I mean, you just have
Com-
to deal with it.
yeah, the situation, because the components, the number of factors are so many, so
Yeah,
many different people that you could encounter, and so many different
yeah,
experiences. It can be
yeah.
quite crazy. So now, staying on the touring theme, what was touring in Europe like? Of course, compared to touring here. And what was your longest tour, and what were some of the memories from there?
So it was very different from touring here. First of all, over here, when you're touring on a bicycle, I mean, remember when we started the racing scene over here in 2008, 2009. If you were on a bicycle wearing a helmet and lycra, people here looked at you like you were from Mars,
Yeah,
right? Still
exactly.
happens if you're out of town, right?
Yeah.
Imagine back then, and my bike was fluorescent yellow, green, and blue. Okay, and so there was this insane thing where people would look at us traveling by bicycles and they thought we were mad. But there was three of us, right? And so it's different. You're in a gang, you're together. We were Indians in India, so whatever. It was different. Of course, in Europe, when I was touring, which was in about 1997, 98, probably the most traveling. So the longest tour that I did, to answer your question, was 2,550 kilometers.
Hmm.
Um, and it was through the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and then zigzagging my way down France to the Italian border. And the plan was to continue into Italy, but I had actually kind of had enough by the time I got there, because a lot of stuff was breaking down on the bike, because I'd been through the Ardennes Mountains, the Vosges Mountains, and then the Alps. So it's a lot of climbing with 20 kilos of baggage. So
Right.
everything was short on the bike. And but it was very different. And I think the biggest difference was that I was alone.
Hmm.
This was a trip that I just did completely on my own. So you spend a lot of time with yourself, and like you mentioned, you meet a lot of people. So that's something that happens on one hand, and on the other hand, you don't see anybody. And I remember 3 days in the Alps without meeting a single person, just me
Wow.
and my bike and these mountains. And every time you get to the top and you look, you think you're there, and then you look and you just see a sea of mountains. You just see peaks and peaks and peaks, and you're like, what am I doing? If you look the other way, it's the same, and you just kind of keep going. And 3 days, I remember, without meeting anybody was insane, because it's kind of like a vipassana experience on a bicycle.
Exactly
You know?
what I was thinking. Right.
Yeah, because so people who've done vipassana and we've exchanged notes, I mean, a lot of what they say I completely relate to from that experience. And I think one of the craziest things that happened on that tour, and this is the beautiful thing, you're in nature, you're alone, you're on your bike and with your thoughts, right? Doing something physical. I remembered all the words to a Malayalam song about a crow that I learned when I was a little kid, 3 years old or something. I didn't even know that I knew that song. The whole song came back, all the words, you
Wow.
know. It's so crazy. So all these kind of crazy, weird things happen, and then you're camping, so you're staying in campsites. If you reach a place with a campsite, you meet people there. Everybody's kind of traveling. You meet bikers. You meet all sorts of people, and it's really exciting. And it's kind of like backpacking, traveling with your backpack, and you're self-sufficient. But again, there were no cell phones back then.
Yeah.
So this whole we live in this era now where we're so connected, right? Like you and I'll be talking on this thing here, and we might be messaging each other on WhatsApp. Everything is like instant. So then it was not, and there was no Garmin. I
Right.
mean, Garmin existed as a company, but they weren't yet doing things with cycling. So the whole satellite GPS thing was not a thing in
Yeah.
cycling. So I was traveling with maps, road maps, paper
Right.
maps, right? And it's heavy. To carry maps is heavy. So I would buy maps along the way of the regions that I was traveling through, because you get a map for a region. And then at night in the tent, I would plan out my route. And I remember, oh, I should have found it. I had a device which is like with a little wheel at the end,
Uh-huh.
and then it has a dial. And then you choose the scale of the map. So the dial has all the different scales in different colors. And then you wheel the thing along the road that you're planning to take. And then
Uh-huh.
it tells you what is the distance, you know.
Wow. Nice.
So you could plan what was the next day. So you kind of actually going along the map, along the road, and then you're like, okay, that's 120 k's. Maybe that's as much as I'll do tomorrow. So then I'm going to reach roughly one of these towns, and you don't know if you'll reach, if you won't reach. So there's just so much mystery, and you don't know your destination, and you don't necessarily have a plan, which is something I like. Um, and so it's kind of discovery. You put yourself out there, and I think everybody should tow by bicycle at some point.
Awesome.
I'm
Awesome,
looking
man.
forward to doing it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great. Great. When was this? Which year?
I guess 97 must have been around 97.
Right.
Steel bike.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
um, and you get into rituals as well, because every night you
Hmm.
pitch your tent,
Hmm.
right? And every morning you pack your tent. Every night you cook your dinner. And then before that, you bought your dinner at some local store or local supermarket. So you get into these daily rituals, and you're traveling as light as you can. So you've got like maybe 2 pairs of riding kit and one
Hmm.
or 2 pairs of clothes. The rest is like your gear, your tools, spares, other stuff that you need, tent. It all added up to about 20 kilos, I remember, and maps. It's the bare minimum
Hmm.
that you should carry. And there's something so liberating when you have so little with you, just what you need, you know. Um, and it feels like you have so much because you have the world around you, and that's what you're experiencing. So there's a real feeling of richness that comes with it. You absorb. I mean, you know how it is on a bicycle, right?
Yeah.
You feel the terrain, you feel the wind, you get the smells, the temperature. It's so real. And the scenery is just unfolding itself as you go, and it changes all the time. It's changing, and it's really hard. I mean, the weather, you don't know what's going to happen. I remember about 1 week of non-stop rain, wet tent, wet clothes. Like, I was crying. I was just like, no, this is hell. Should I stop? But you don't. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So,
So,
bicycle
so
touring, guys.
awesome. Awesome. So, what got you started on this? It what uh, why did you do something like that? What
The
got you
touring.
started? Yeah.
I mean, it's just, my dad was a crazy guy, and so his life was all full of adventure, and it was all about travel and discovering places. And my entire childhood, I heard stories about that, of all his journeys around the world, in the 50s, and I mean really long ago. And That is 1950 for the young folks listening. It was last century, last millennium. Uh, so um, So, that desire to travel and discover places was always there. And then there was the love for bicycles and motorcycles. I mean, I grew up with bicycles and motorcycles, right? And I
Yeah.
did a lot of touring on motorcycles as well. I mean, both in India and abroad. Um, so there's no better way. And after I had experienced it here, I knew I wanted to do it there. And actually what happened was, when I was going to Europe, when I was done with school here and I was going to college there, the plan was to ride there. In 1996, I think that was a plan, was to ride to Paris from here. And I was working on that plan. And what happened is I then got hepatitis really bad, right? I think nearly killed me. And
Wow.
so that erased all of that. And I was just sick for a really long time. And then recovery took ages. So of course I got back into cycling when I reached Europe, when I reached
Hmm.
the Netherlands.
Okay.
But I had to kind of build back.
Nice, nice. So I remember you were also a bike courier or a fixie hipster at
Yeah,
one point. What was that
yeah,
about?
yeah. So when I lived in the Netherlands, um, I did all these jobs, right, as a student to earn money. And I mean, I worked in cafes, in bars and restaurants, kitchens, everything, name it. And I mean, Holland, with its rich cycling culture, um, you had all of these bicycle messengers, right, who were delivering packets all over the place. And of course, I had a lot of friends who were cyclists. And a lot of people I went to college with were also doing this. But it was very interesting because bicycle messengers, there are subcultures all over the world, right? Some places it's fixies. If you go to New York, it's like being really badass with piercings and tattoos and doing really daredevil stuff on really shitty bikes. There's all these subcultures. But the subculture where I was, right, um, it was very performance kind of subculture. And I think that's one of the things that really got me into performance cycling, because what happened is that company guaranteed the quickest delivery of any documents in the Netherlands. Okay.
Wow.
Of course, it didn't deliver to the whole Netherlands. It was for our town, but that company, right? And what happened is that all the people who worked as bike messengers there, maybe not all, but a lot of them, they were semi-pro cyclists. So they were
Huh.
all racers, right? And you need to train. And cycling, I mean, as a profession, it's a shit job, right? If it comes to earning money, unless you're in the top percentage, it's really tough, right? You do it for
Yeah.
the love.
Yeah.
It's not money. Sponsorship is also like you get bits and bobs, right? So these guys were all racers, like Cat 1 type racers. And they did this so that they could earn money while actually training,
Hmm.
right? So the typical day of a bike messenger, you had a 5-hour shift. And typically in the 5 hours, you would do anything between 90 and 110, maybe 120 kilometers at the most, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But when it was like intervals. When
Right.
you were sent to pick up and to deliver, full gas, right? And then you kind of recover. And then the next call comes and full gas. And it's funny, I'll tell you about it. So again, this was in the late 90s. It was very interesting. The way it worked is we had a headquarters, right? And the headquarters had a giant table, which was a map of the entire city. And we would have numbers which depended on the cell phone that we had. So cell phones were new. So we had like now it's a super cool hipster kind of bag to have, where you roll the top, waterproof orange bag with the straps, and we'd put the phone in over here. And then we had to have a book which was a map, right, of the city, which we would
Yeah.
stick into our shorts, right? Like you slide
Hmm.
it up from your knee, and
Hmm.
that was there. And so the guys in the office would look at who is where on the map, and then they decide who to call, and you'd be riding. So while riding, you had to take the call. There was no hands free. that wasn't there. You take the call, right?
Yeah.
And then they'd give you the address. So then you had a small notepad that you'd pull out while riding, and then you'd write down the address, right? And then you'd look at the map, and then you'd shoot over there, and then you'd deliver and whatnot. So it was crazy. It was really an old school analog way of doing things. But you got your training in, and what happened is that all of the athletes, right, all of the riders who were doing delivery, they didn't get paid in money. They
Hmm.
got paid in points. bikes because that's what they needed. They needed a new Dura-Ace drivetrain. And this company was able to buy those without paying taxes because they were a cycling delivery company. So it
Mm-hmm.
was cheaper to get your parts like that than to get your paid in cash and then buy. So people would receive their salaries in a crankset, in a cassette, in an RD, an FD, So the number of hours you work, so an FD is like so many hours of work. An RD is like that many hours of work, you know.
Crazy.
So it was really weird, and all of the it was really cool, and all of the bikes that were lined up at work were all pretty slick bikes. Some guys used their own racing bikes and whatnot. So that whole career experience was really like a step into racing. Of course, the
Mm-hmm.
company had its own team that they
Mm-hmm.
would compete. I actually never competed with the company.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, that really gave me a taste of competitive cycling is that when I lived in Amsterdam, um, after college, I would ride every day, typically about maybe, 60 to 90 Ks or something like that in the evenings. And so Rabobank, if you remember, Rabobank was a big team back
Right.
then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so Rabobank had its development team, and they would train along the same route where I used to go cycling, which was along a river,
Mm-hmm.
and at about the same time. So what I started doing was kind of getting the timing right of the Rabobank team, and then I would go and jump on the back,
Wow.
and I would
Okay.
just follow these guys and do whatever the hell they were doing. I don't think I knew about heart rate, intervals, watts, nothing. It's just when they went, I went. When they slowed, I slowed. It was. But that was really like a good start of training. Just following this team around. Um,
So
and
you actually trained with the pros, huh? Nice.
well, young development pros, and they didn't like me because I was an annoying guy who would come in. So I was not friends with them. I was not part of their program or nothing like that. I'd just try and catch them, and then I'd follow them for a good while until I needed to go back.
Right.
And I thought it'd be like, oh, this guy again type of thing. But whatever, it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, man. So, uh, then from there, where did you end up? When did you, when did you come back to India, and how did the cycling start here?
So I think I came back to India end of 2004, 2005. I'd been
Mm-hmm.
in the US before that. And actually, my time in the US, so about 2 years, was the only time in my life that I stopped cycling.
Okay.
Um, I completely stopped because I was in New York, super competitive place, desk job, working through the nights, eating pizza, drinking alcohol because you're stressed out, and then smoking cigarettes, and just like the most unhealthy life. And you and I have both had this journey of being really big guys, overweight, and then losing it with cycling, right? So I went from, being normal to being really huge, like about 90 kgs. And then when I came back to India, my health was so bad that I figured I needed to do something. And then, cycling came to the rescue again. So I started riding. Um, but I was just really trying to start breathing again, shed some weight. That was the aim of it. And nobody was cycling here. I mean, nobody that I knew. The scene
Mm-hmm.
was just getting going.
Right.
Bots bumped on the saddle. That was the time when they started doing their thing. Venki, wheel sports. So it was kind of the beginning of all of those things, and I slowly started meeting people.
Mm.
But I was just cycling to get fit again, and
Okay.
and the whole racing thing happened actually with kind of through TFN. When TFN started, I met some other people, and that's when I actually got to meet people who were also cycling in Bangalore for the first time. Otherwise, it
Okay.
was just I was doing it by myself.
Okay. So
And
when doing it by yourself, was it like about 2004, 2005, was it?
2000, maybe 2006 to 2006, 2007, 2008,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
around then.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And your focus was weight loss and fitness.
Well, it started off with, I was still smoking cigarettes then coming back from the US, and I just got so sick in Bangalore. And there was a point where I kind of collapsed in my lungs, and I'm asthmatic, and my lungs were just, I was lying on the floor in my mom's house looking at the ceiling like, my God, I'm going to die. I can't breathe. What am I doing? Got to get my life back together. And then the whole cycling thing kind of started again. So I started riding 15 Ks a day, but really hard. And then I started losing weight. And then I started commuting by bike. So my factory was 30 kilometers away. So I would ride there and ride back, on a big, heavy mountain bike. So then I started doing 60 Ks a day at some point. And then I was getting fit, then I was shedding weight and I was getting fit. And actually, then there was one interesting ride that happened. It was some ride with Rohan Kini, me, it was a bunch of guys, and I was also just meeting them for the first time, and we were saying like, what, we should organize some races, wouldn't that be fun? And Matt, who right, Matt Barrett and I mean the kind of birth in a sense of BBCH. It's like I'm claiming here, but I think this is the true story. I remember Matt and I having a conversation that we should start organizing races. He lived in Chennai at the time and I was in Bangalore. And we said, let's do time trials. It's super simple. You don't need to know racing. People will get into it. And it's easy. It's easy. Let's do that. And then we had this conversation, and I remember speaking to Rohan about it on a ride and whatnot. And then before you knew it, this guy, was his name Jagan?
Yeah, Jagannath Murthy and Vashu Mishra.
Yeah, so Jagan organized a time trial. Like, so he's like, oh, okay, boom. And then he just did it. And that was like the first BBCH, right?
Yeah.
And everybody was kind of big and chubby on a mountain bike with a big mustache and wearing a jacket and a backpack. And that was racing, It's really cool how much it's changed since then. And then Matt started organizing time trials in Chennai. And really, that was the beginning of racing here in an organized manner. That was not something that was done by the federation for the elite crowd as it existed at the time, right? For guys like you and me, that was the beginning.
Yeah. So that was 2008, I guess, right? And I remember when I was speaking to Rohan for the podcast, he was mentioning you guys riding together and talking about it and getting to know about the race that the Vashu and Jagannath Murthy organizing. And then, you guys joining the next one, and, that's how the things took off. I remember coming to Bangalore in end of 2010, and coming to watch the first ITT of 2011 on Sarjapur Road. And, I don't know if you were there. Not sure. On Sarjapur Road there was an ITT happening, and I came there riding on my I think Hero Hawk or something, and I was like watching all the guys. I remember seeing Dalam, the you remember, right, the guys from Cleated Warriors. Venkatachalam Ramakrishnan, and Cleated Warriors, and these guys. I remember seeing Naveen Raj, Sriram, the Scott Sriram.
This was the race off Sarjapur Road. That was on the 24th of May, 2000. It wasn't it 2010.
Oh no, I wasn't here in 2010.
Oh, okay.
2011. The first February 2011 was the race I first saw, and I was like, whoa, who are these guys?
Yeah, yeah,
I remember seeing Shamim, parking his bike on a trainer and warming up, and I'm like, why is he riding on a stationary thing when you have the
yeah,
road
yeah.
and all that? It was like crazy. I was like, I remember seeing at the end of the day, people yeah, putting numbers in the excel to get the results, and giving medals and all that. I was like, I was really taken in by all the this
Yeah.
thing, and I was making sure that whenever I can, I was riding to the start of the races, and I was watching the races. That's how I kind of got into this whole BBCH thing. It was
Yeah.
fantastic to watch. And you guys were, the uh, starting crowd at that time, right? You
Yeah.
guys were like fully into racing.
So, the thing is that what happened when BBCH started is that when I came back to India, I had this dream. I've always been obsessed with cycling my whole life, right? But I really believe that with a country of whatever 1 billion, there's got to be some champions over here. And my thing was like, you know what? I'll find these guys, right? Let that be my thing. I'm going to find them, and I'm going to. So my claim at the time was I wanted to put the first Indian in the Tour de France, right? On some team, whatever, like get someone and get them there, right? And so then this whole thing started to look for riders. And when BBCH started, I was like, wow, okay, so now here is a scene, right? So we can use the scene. So my focus was never to be part of the organization of BBCH and set up things, even though we did help. I mean, in the beginning, it was all of us were friends, right? Just
Yeah.
just doing it. But my focus was like, you know what? I'm going to be focused on the pro cycling edge, like create a team, be as professional as we can, train as professionally as we can, and sort out equipment and this and that. And so that journey started. Like I started looking for people within my factory, so I would make them ride with me, once a week.
Uh-huh.
And then I found some talented guys, and then there was engineering students. I started seeing people, and then working with them and trying to mentor them, right? um, that's how the whole thing started. And then I remember I noticed Naveen Raj. You were talking about him, right?
Yeah.
So he was a little kid at that time, and I remember this kid. And Naveen, he didn't speak much, and when he spoke, it wasn't really in English. And I knew him because he was like the mech, or the kid who was in Venky's shop. And then suddenly, when we were on these mountain bike races, this guy was like starting to overtake me, and super aggressively. And so he like got, in my mind, I was like, wow, who's this kid? I really like his aggressive riding style. And um, and then through Venky, I got to know more and more of the riders who were on the federation side of things,
Right.
and these two worlds never crossed back
Never.
then.
Yeah.
There was that, and there was this, and it's almost like they didn't know about each other,
No.
right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, okay, we've got to bring this together somehow. We've got to get those guys and sort them out, because and bring something modern to it. They're stuck in doing things the way it's been done for, I don't know. It's another world, but there's talent, right?
Yeah.
And there's dedicated people. And that was a kind of the birth of SKCT as we know it today, even though it went through, it was KYNKYNY Racing, and then it became KYNKYNY Wheel Sports. And KYNKYNY Wheel Sports was probably really the melting pot
Hmm.
where we started having riders from both these worlds coming together.
Yeah.
Loki suddenly was part of the team. And for me, it was like when I saw Loki and I saw Naveen Raj, I was like, okay, I'm going to build around this. I'm going to
Yeah.
start to bring people in and build around these two guys. One is experienced, one is starting. They represent different things. Let's build around this. And it was also, there was no sponsorship in those days, so it was really like looking for money for a sport that nobody was interested in, that had zero visibility and zero eyeballs. So it was a mad journey. It was really a
Yeah.
mad journey trying to get people to invest in this.
Yeah, so I remember the as you said, the KYNKYNY team. There was black and yellow with the wheel kind of thing,
Yeah,
and then it becoming collaborating with Wheel Sports Venki and becoming KYNKYNY Wheel Sports a
yeah,
team, right?
yeah.
And then uh, you know when did this specialized come into the picture? I think although you bought in the people from the federation, the guys from Bijapur, I think through Venki,
Yeah.
uh, and got this team together, and you were participating in primarily BBCH and doing well. But when did this specialized KYNKYNY team, specialized come into the picture,
Yeah.
and how did that change the dynamics?
So actually, what happened is that we started, of course, BBCH, we would do all of the races, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then we were also participating in the national level races and what they call the cyclothons and stuff back then.
Mm-hmm.
But that was very complicated because the federation was involved
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's like a private team. Who's heard of a private team? So there was a lot of friction over there. It was only state teams, and
Exactly.
I remember. Kind of climbing over a fence and joining one of these federation races because we weren't allowed to start. So I was like, okay, I'll jump the fence here and then join. So we did a lot of crazy things in the beginning. But what happened is that we started with KYNKYNY Racing, which was a red and black team, right? You see, Naveen Raj posted a picture the other day on Instagram about, the beginning of it for him, and he was in that red and black. That's what he would have been wearing at the race you talked about.
Exactly the race. Yeah, that was the race.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the race on his yellow giant.
Yeah.
And I finished second that day. It was my birthday. I remember it was on my birthday. And so what happened is that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get these people, and my aim was to create a continental team. So it would be a UCI team, not a pro continental team, the most basic level of a continental team, so that we could compete internationally. And I was trying to get money for this, and I was going, oh my god, every day here, there, talking to people. That's why that team looked so good. The yellow and black team. I think that was probably the first really good-looking team in the country. I like the red and black also, but that was like we did it ourselves, screen printing types on decathlon jerseys that my mom carried back from France because decathlon wasn't in India. But these, we had these jerseys printed in God knows where, in Taiwan or somewhere, through Venki's contacts. And we actually had sponsors on the jersey who were actually our sponsors, right? So it was starting to become real. And I was doing a lot of work to document things, to create booklets, so that, I'm a designer by profession, right? So that whole professional angle is something I really brought to the team. How to have something that looks really good, how to present it really well, how to tell a good story, and how to get people to invest in it, right? So that's where I was pushing really hard, trying to make this team amazing. And then Darren Reed, he was also, even from before we were yellow and black, Darren was a pro, right? He was a pro from Europe, an Australian rider, and he was living in India. And then he started riding with me. And everybody that I felt could bring something to it, I would go to them and say, help. So Darren did a lot to help us really understand how to become professional in our riding, how to think as a team, what are the things you need to do. So I was like learning everything that I could from him. And what happened was, to answer your question now, I remember that one day I got I was checking my mail on my phone, and I saw a mail from Specialized. And there was no Specialized in India. Specialized is equal to Ferrari. It's something abroad that is like awesome, and what is it? And I'm like, how am I getting spam from Specialized? I haven't even gone to a website and subscribed to anything. But I was like, whatever, random. So I opened it, right? And I scrolled to the bottom, and then I saw that it was from Joe Whedon, who at the time was the head of business development for Asia. And I'm like, oh, this is from a real person with the real job. And then I was like, shit. So I scroll back to the top of the mail, And then it said, "Dear Mr. Radhakrishnan." And I was like, oh my God, this is an email to me from Specialized. What the hell is this, right? So it turns out that Joe was traveling through the country, and Specialized was doing market research on India,
Hmm.
right? Because, it's a big country, so much promise and all of that. And he got my number through the head of Nike from India, who, of course, I had been to Nike and pestered them for sponsorship. And, they couldn't help, but because, what is cycling? But, I had really good conversations with them, and they kept my card, and they said like, hey, you know what? Because, Nike and Specialized, two big American brands, right? So they, of
Right.
course, talk to each other.
Yeah.
They said, take this guy's card, talk to him. He's crazy. It's like all about cycling and all, and maybe he can help you. So I remember meeting Joe to talk about cycling in India. And we met over breakfast because he was flying out that the next day. And we met for breakfast. And we had this amazing conversation, about cycling, and he had questions. But then at some point I was just talking, and I was telling him about everything that we were doing with these cyclists and what is my dream and how we've put it together. And he just stopped talking and listening to my blah 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 blah. And then at the end he was like, oh my God, I've spoken to everybody in the country, and this is the first conversation that has passion for the sport, not like I can import a container and I can sell it and look, I have a shop. And because for me it was not business, right? It was pure passion with sport. And so it was great. And he was flying out. And then I realized, I was like, oh my God, there's a BBCH race tomorrow, right? It was either tomorrow or day after. And I was like, Joe, you have to come. I made him cancel his ticket. Right? He was like, no, I'm due back in Singapore. I said, cancel your ticket, cancel, reschedule, right? So he stays. I made him stay. And I remember I think it was Venki who then took him in his car, right? And it was the KYNKYNY Wheel Sports team.
Right.
And it was one of those races where it was not too busy because everybody was away at TFN. It was in December.
Oh, yeah.
But the people who were there were all of the top cyclists, a lot of them from the federation side,
Right.
And I remember we had a team of about 6 guys, right? And it was, Venki, it was hard racing, man, because there was a lot of tension between us and Samim Rizvi's team. I remember back then, so it was like, it was like, win or die type of racing.
Was it on Old Madras Road?
Yeah.
Okay, I heard about this, Rose. Yeah,
Yes.
Go
ahead. And so the head of business development for Asia is sitting in a car following the race, and he's looking at us, and we're racing on these old steel bikes and whatnot. And he was just like, his jaw was like this because it was such hard racing,
Yeah.
And it was so raw. It's like going and seeing racing in Africa somewhere. And his mind was blown that this even exists in India. And I remember the funny thing is we lost that race. And we lost it to pretty much one guy, and we had a lead out and everything, and we lost. But the point is, it was an amazing race to watch, attacks and chase and attacks and chase. And so then Joe got on his flight, and he was like, wow, I just saw something crazy, and then we stayed in touch for a long time. And I was like, well, the story is that another team was supposed to be sponsored somewhere in Asia. And I think that fell through because it was looking a bit sketchy. Okay. And suddenly there was an opportunity to do something. And he said, I've got something in India. I know someone who can do something. And then he wrote to me, and I was like, let's do this. And it took a long time to put it together. But then we basically got a pro team sponsorship, right? A regional pro team sponsorship. And it was, I remember I cried so much when it finally came through because it was a lot of work, a lot of work to make it happen. But suddenly we were going to be sponsored with our equipment and this and that, and no money from the brand. Usually that doesn't happen. Yeah. But now it was like, I've got the biggest name. And I remember Specialized telling me, the moment you're a Specialized team, everything else will fall into place. That's exactly what happened, because suddenly you're sponsored by Ferrari. Pirelli is interested. Shell is interested. Everybody's interested, right? So it was a lot of work putting that team together. It was really like day and night work for me at the time. And I think that's when things were the hardest for me because I still had my, two companies that I was working with. And then there was the team, and then there was training, and then I was also on the team. So that was really tough times, actually. It looked super glorious to everybody else because we put out the most shiny picture. But it was really, for me personally, it was a very, very tough time. But it was like a all or nothing approach.
Yeah.
Let's go
So
all the way.
that's what it is about, right? You can be super busy with whatever else you were doing, but you were so passionate about cycling that it did not matter. You were putting yourself through hell to make things happen, right?
Yeah.
So how did it affect the work, and how did you kind of manage through those times? Because you were actually training and racing with the team as well. You were part of the team.
Yeah. So I remember, I mean, it was really tough because I used to train minimum 110 kilometers every day back then. So I still had to go to the factory, right? But what I would do is I would ride 60 Ks to the factory, a long way, and then I would ride 50 Ks back, a little shorter. So I split my training into morning and evening. And in between that was a full factory day, right, which was quite physical. But, I was commuting to the factory before, but what changed now was I really looked at it as training. So I was in my cycling kit, my bags and all were going with the factory vehicle. So I was like training, and I remember Darren and I used to ride out together. Um, and then he'd drop me off at the factory and head back, and then I'd ride back in the evening. So there was a lot of riding. There was work, and yes, work was affected because you're building you have a startup on one hand, then this is another startup. It's completely like a startup. It takes so much attention, and then there's family. You have two kids. So it was really a crazy juggling act back then. And then you have your marriage, and this was a lot because suddenly it's like I had 12 new kids, from
with the team.
2 kids to 12 kids. And we went all the way with that team, which means that I was housing them. They were not all of them, but most of them were living together in one house. So you really have to look after, because that has all of its dramas, like any family. And I was daddy to that family. So it's like suddenly you have another family that you have to look after. And then, of course, there's tensions that happen. Then there's also tensions at work, because my factory was also like another family for me. These guys I work with, we were building furniture together for years, and suddenly it's like, oh, now he's really interested in this other stuff. And so a lot of push and pull in every direction, and you're training hard on top of it and trying to perform really well. So I think that was the time at which cycling was the toughest for me. We did really well as a team because nobody else was training that way, racing that way at the time. The level of cycling was also very different then from what it is now. Right. And, suddenly we had these guys who were cyclists that we brought into the scene here. So we won almost everything there was to win. I don't think, yes, it is an achievement, but it would be very different today. It would be a lot more, there'd be a much stiffer competition if we did something like that today. The idea behind that team was to open the doors, to do one thing so that now the next things come. And then other bicycle brands started sponsoring teams and cyclists, right? So that was the main objective here. It's like, let's bring this kind of professional cycling to India.
It was a pioneering thing in so many ways, not just bringing a brand here and giving them exposure. It opened like you said, it opened the doors for so many brands and so many athletes all over India. The Trek came into the picture, Scott came into the picture, and tried to do their own teams, and they succeeded in to various degrees, but the impetus was there from what you guys have done, right? It was massive. And now what with the kind of exposure and the energy that Specialized KYNKYNY has started, it has inspired so many young athletes who are now doing well at nationals and otherwise. Like, no one has imagined at that time a private team doing well. Now there are so
Yeah,
many private individuals who show up
yep,
and do well at nationals, right? it was
exactly.
it is incredible the kind of positive effect that the team had.
Yeah. I mean,
Kudos.
it was really like we had celebrity status back then.
Yeah.
And I remember in the cycling world, everybody knew the team, everybody knew me because I was like team boss and stuff. And people would ask me, oh, these other teams have started now. Trek has started and Scott is doing something. How do you feel about that? And I was like, this is brilliant. This is exactly what we want.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
want only one team that shows up and wins everything because that's not sport, right? You need the other teams to come and fight in the game. And it's funny because recently I was at some cycling thing, and I had to introduce myself to people, and nobody knew who I was, and this was like federation kind of level folks, and I was like, wow, I'm really out of the picture now, but look at the scene, it's awesome. So all of these young riders today who are really on the scene, I don't even know if they know about that team. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it doesn't matter because the ball is rolling now
Ball
and
is
it'll.
rolling.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
those are key
absolutely.
names.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
maybe when I'm much older, I'll come back, and then maybe we can take a team and then fulfill that dream of having a continental team from India, right? Not now, but
definitely, man.
maybe later.
Sure, man. So in 2012 is when this thing really took off, right? So
Yeah.
and one rider came into the picture in 2012. Someone who jumped on plane from US and landed here and landed in a race and then jumped directly into the team. How did that impact the team, and how did that
Yeah.
change the complexion of the team?
So that's a great story, actually. I remember Venki telling me like, hey, this guy from the US got in touch with me. He's a cyclist there. He's doing this and that. He's interested in the team and whatnot. You talk to him. So we didn't talk. I think it was on everything was by email. So it was Naveen John, right? And he's like, hey man, I saw your the team, and I watched the launch, live on the internet and this and that, and it's been my dream to come back, and this is what I'm doing. I'm racing collegiate in the US, and so he told me all of this stuff, and I was just like, okay, wow. On one hand, this is really cool, but what I told him was, dude, just shut up, stay where you are. There's a scene over there. You're going to get nothing if you come over here because there is no big scene yet.
Yeah.
We're trying to make a scene, but I don't know what you're going to get from it. You're in the middle of cycling there, right?
Right.
So I gave him all of this good advice, right? Next thing you know, this guy shows up at a race, I think either before or after the race, and he's like, hey, I'm Naveen. We communicated. So I was like, yeah, I told you not to come, right? He's like, yeah, well, I'm here. So what do we do? So I was like, damn, what a guy. So of course we talked, and we got him on board with the team. And it was so complicated and stupid because we were like a pro team sponsored by a brand, and we had got all of our sponsorship stuff, and suddenly there's one more person that was not planned for in the larger scheme of things. Thank God he was riding a specialized bike. He had his
Specialized
brilliant.
LA.
If he didn't, the whole thing would have been so much more complicated because branding is so important in these things, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
at level. So that worked. So he didn't care. He was like, I'll ride my old bike, whatever. He didn't believe in equipment at all. I was like, dude, you got to try these shoes. S-Works, they're really good. He was like, nah. It was hard. Naveen's, he's got his own style, but I think it took him. Maybe that's when he started looking at all of these different things. Like I had to convince him, you need to wear these shoes, you need to wear this helmet, you need to. But Naveen coming on board the team really changed everything. It brought science to the team because until then we were training in a very, I don't know, on one hand it's scientific, but it's kind of the old school of scientific, right?
Mm.
So Darren had been mentoring us for a long time, and he comes from the Cadell Evans era. They raced
Right.
together in Australia as
Yeah.
youngsters, so
Yeah.
it's that age group. And training was done in a different way, right? People weren't really looking at watts. So it was the way to do it. And that's how we kind of trained with him. And Naveen was part of, he's this young engineer and, all about the numbers and watts and, like looking at graphs and very different, right? Um, and, Darren had left and Naveen had come. So it was like there was a switch of advisory guard, and I
Yeah.
was just all ears because anybody who can bring anything, bring it. And, so he brought that whole scientific training edge to the team. So we watched him do it, and then he started helping different riders and kind of coaching them along within the team, and it changed a lot of things. And I remember scoring power meters for everyone on the team, and we got a fantastic sponsorship there, and we were able to look at these numbers and train differently. Um, but yeah, that's definitely something that Naveen really changed with the team, and he's continued to do that now, right? So
Yeah.
he's coaching, he has his way of doing things, and I think that changed a lot of things in the whole country.
It
Uh,
did. It did.
yeah,
I think his impact, uh, the Kinkini kind of the specialized Kinkini provided that base for him, that launching pad for him. But
yeah,
that what you guys have done, what you and him have done, has completely changed the way I think a lot of us are training in India now.
yeah,
Like the power training, I remember riding with him one of his first rides to Nandi and back, and riding with him, and he was asking, "Are you guys on Strava?" I was like, "What Strava? No." And immediately I came back home and looked at Google Strava and then installed and all that. So we were using Garmin and all that, but not really doing
yeah,
anything about the data, right? So
yeah.
that and now not a single serious cyclist is riding without a power meter.
I know it's crazy.
It's crazy how the one team, one person can affect the ecosystem like that, right?
Yeah,
It is incredible the effect
yeah.
you guys had on the system. So,
First
awesome.
fully decked up car as well, right? Team car with the bikes on top and all of the stickers, and yeah, oh, good times, man. Really good times.
Awesome. Okay, now let us come to some of the events you guys took part as a team and also as you as an individual, right? You guys had your first national medal, what, in 2014, was it? I think
Naveen's
Naveen's. Yeah.
Naveen's identity, was it 2014? It might have been 2014.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might. I'm very bad with remembering dates, but it might
Yeah.
have been. Yeah. And I mean, it was a very important national medal. Not only, I mean, of course, it was important for him because that's what he came back for. His goal was to come back to India and become a national champion. And now he's done it more times than we can count. But that was the first one, and I remember us working really hard towards that because he had his training method, and the team was trying to support him with that. I was into well, actually, both of us were had studied body geometry, fit, and understood about aerodynamics and body position, and doing all sorts of crazy work on his bike to basically marginal gains, right? Looking for a gain in every possible place that we could, and we worked really hard towards that medal. So I mean, I remember like just tears when he came and crossed the line and we knew that he won. It was like it was so big. That victory was so huge, and it meant so many things. He won that in his team kit. It's as if we had also been kind of accepted by the federation.
Right.
We were the first disruption to railways, forces, and maybe Punjab. Or basically railways and forces was always same
Yeah.
story for the last. And suddenly there's this like kinkiny, irritating thing in the
Yeah.
scene, right? Um, and and I remember that even at one of the Tour de India, they allowed us to race as a private team. And I remember Sridhar Savanur, they put him on our team, right? He
Oh,
actually raced with, he later became national champion, but he raced in our kit with our
wow.
team. That was also a turning point for him because he suddenly saw something different in cycling for the first time. Like, whoa, these guys operate, this is a whole different scene. Um, but that victory was huge because it was, of course, an individual victory. It was a victory for the team. For me, I mean, I am a cyclist myself. I do race. We race against each other. Sometimes I win, sometimes I don't. But for me, the biggest victories are the ones that I take to heart the most are the ones of my riders or guys that I'm mentoring or my team, because it's much bigger than one individual. A lot of
Yeah.
people are working towards it.
Yeah.
There's Ayub who's driving the car, who's following Naveen. There's all of this coordination. There's the team managers. There's all of these people who are putting time into making this one person win, and therefore the victory actually feels so big because everybody's done something towards
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
um, so for me that meant a lot, and all of the team victories meant a lot. So that was nationals, but then there was also traveling abroad,
Hmm.
which was really big because the aim was to make an internationally competitive Indian team.
Right.
So we would go and participate in at the at the high club level where you've been as well, right? Like the Tour of Friendship,
Correct.
um, which is a melting pot for club level riders, semi pros, and even pros, right? It all kind of comes together,
Yeah.
and when we competed there, it was they thought we were the Indian team. So they would call us the some kinky, something funny Indian team, right? And that was really massive because India was now competing on the world stage, right? It's not the UCI, it's not the Pro Tour, but still
Yeah.
uh, in a field of riders from all over the world with organized teams and making an impression. And we won. We won the juniors, right? Naveen Raj came back with the gold
Nice. Yeah.
on a maiden outing, and Loki finished third, right?
Loki
So
finished third in the overall seniors thing, or his age group, is it?
in the top level, in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
elite
In the
category,
open. Yeah.
he finished third or second. I think he finished third. I can't
Okay.
remember.
Hmm.
Remember, there was a trophy.
Yeah.
Um, I can't remember all of the details now, but that was really. And then we got a lot of international press
Hmm.
because it's like, whoa, this like brown team.
Yeah.
Oh, we see brown and black cyclists. It did not exist. Everybody was white, and there was a brown team. So those were participation in those races was also a huge victory, and getting noticed and having a story to tell. So I personally have unfinished business feeling with that.
Yeah.
Uh, Naveen went on to compete in Australia with the MAP team, which was fantastic. Probably the first Indian pro on a pro level team abroad. But definitely now we are ready to do a lot more
Hmm.
because it's a bigger scene. There's so many more serious cyclists. There are cyclists that have support from their parents, and it's more accepted. So definitely something can happen. So I have a feeling of unfinished business,
Yeah.
but I can't do it in the middle of other careers right now. That would have to be a really focused effort
Yeah. Yeah.
to get some Indian riders out there.
Man, awesome. And you guys, this was in what, 2000, Tour of Friendship, 2013,
2012
14?
onward.
Okay. Yeah. Great. And
2012.
yeah, you got the team to participate in local events like TFN, and you yourself have participated and many times. How many times did you do TFN?
maybe 4.
4 times.
I
And
think.
how many times did you win the Masters? All the time?
No. Oh, I don't even know if there was a Masters in the beginning.
No, not in
I
the
definitely
beginning.
know
No.
I won once.
Yeah,
Uh,
correct.
I definitely know I won.
There wasn't Masters at the beginning. You're right.
There wasn't. So when
No.
there was Masters, I won that one. But otherwise, it was yeah, whatever. Then there was the team. There was NJ and Loki. So they did really well. And Niels, of course. Um, the first time we did TFN, that was the first time I did it. We actually did it as a team, and I know then we created a big impression as well, right? Guys in the same kit, all pro and everything. But that was also the intention.
Yeah.
That was, of course, you get some solid training,
Hmm.
but we were there for the training and to really spread the word about the team, because of course we have sponsors. We
Yeah.
want to get maximum visibility. Um, and of course, when you have guys like NJ and Loki riding, you're going to come back with results. It's not
Yeah.
really a problem.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember those days. I think 2012 was your first TFN as a team, and uh, I was there blogging about the tour, and the the impression the team and the guys made is huge. It's not just people in Bangalore or somewhere else, right? People from all over the country coming in and looking at these riders, this team and their performances firsthand had a huge impact, positive impact on all of us. It was like now, although they're on the same team, Naveen and Loki were so close in all those competitive segments,
yeah,
and
yeah.
seeing, and there was like huge gap afterwards after them, and it was
Yeah.
like so good to see.
Just for show, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Look, this is a different type of cyclist. Do you know who got into cycling because of that tour?
yeah. Who?
Someone else who's had a massive impact on Indian cycling. Chentil, Che.
Oh,
So he was
yeah,
photographing. And he was like, who are these guys, man? Because for him, cycling, he knew it as something else. And suddenly he was like, who are these like rockets, these turbocharged creatures? And then he got really interested and he started photographing the team. And he kind of became part of SKCT, right? And he traveled
yeah,
abroad with us to document things. And he's also been one of the people who has really changed, I feel, national level cycling today, because there's coverage with amazing visuals and stories. So a lot of people have had very interesting roles.
yeah,
And I'll selfishly say it started again through SKCT there, his
yeah,
interest.
yeah,
But
yeah.
look where he's gone with it now.
Dude, the impact he has on Indian cycling scene is huge. The kind
Massive.
of massive. Cannot really imagine
Yeah,
the kind of impact he had. I think I should get him on the podcast one of these days.
definitely.
All right. So, talking about you as an athlete, right? You have been, uh, while doing all these amazing things for the team and others, you yourself have been maintaining yourself in top shape and winning the TFN. I still remember, the feeling that I have after. Uh, Being beaten by you by 12 seconds on Kalahati in 2016. I was like, I after riding that day, I thought I have won. I mean, like, it was like massive. I didn't care about the general classification and other segments, and I wanted to do well on that. But you have beaten me by 12 seconds, and like, man, what is he? What? How is he doing this? Like, so how do
Man.
you? Yeah, how do you do this?
So, so that's very funny because Kalhati, every time I've ridden it, my only focus is like to finish the damn thing because you just think you're going to stop each time and you can't pedal, and it's like that one pedal stroke at a time. So I think the timings that you get is what you get, but all of us who ride that, we're just trying to get there.
Yeah, yeah,
um, I think, for me, it's like, okay, by nature, I'm super competitive, right?
yeah, yeah,
um, I like to win, and I like to try to win. Of course, winning for all of us is nice, right? You win sometimes, I win sometimes. It's a great feeling. But it's that whole effort um, towards a goal. And I think guys like us, right, we need a goal in life. And it
yeah,
helps us get through with family, with work, and all of that. Like if we just have to jump on the trainer and spin, it's horrible. But if you know that, hey, you know what, in March I have this event, and then you work towards that, right, and it helps you keep a focus. So for me, cycling has always been like a release with all of the other things that are going on. um, I like to ride hard, and I'm not one of those guys who likes to go and do 160 or 180 kilometers and spend like 6-7 hours on the bike or something. Honestly, like, I'm done with all of that. I'm much older now. I like to be on the bike for 3 hours at the most. I'm happiest on the bike for, sorry, for 2 hours, right? And I like to ride those 2 hours hard. Or I like to ride them super easy, chatting with friends. If I'm riding with you, we'll chat and we'll go. But or I ride super hard. So I my training today it's minimal. Honestly, it's minimal.
mm,
It's a lot of juggling in life, and I get 1 hour in whenever I can. But I'm also past the point where if I'm riding outside, I really like to enjoy my rides. It's become very important for me to not just look at it as training, but just as time that I enjoy, which is why I really like mountain biking the most.
yeah,
So I go to the forest and I ride for 1 hour, just 1 hour, sometimes an hour and a half, but I'm beat. At the end of that, I'm dead because mountain biking is hard, right? It's like
yeah,
go, stop. And so I just really enjoy riding hard, and sometimes it does good for my fitness, sometimes it doesn't. um, but that's honestly how I train today. I work with a coach, and that's helped me a lot. So it helps in the sense that I don't think too much about what is it that I need to do, right? And
right.
you're a coach yourself, and you create structure. So for me, transition cycling coaching is what they've done for me is really just give me structure, and I just follow it. They know how much time I have, which is not much, and they put together the plans, and I just follow that. And when I ride outside, I like to do whatever I want to do. So I get on the
Right.
trainer and do the plan. um, but coming back to your question about how do I get whatever results, honestly, I concentrate a lot on my nutrition. So there came a time when I was getting less and less time to train, and I was getting more and more interested in food. And there was a turning point, which was actually a training camp in Ooty, where there was a
Hmm.
lot of national level riders. And I remember doing this camp with the SKCT team. And I went into this camp with almost no training, right? And I knew that the camp was happening then in December. I cannot train to come up to some level for that. I don't have the time. I have all of these work commitments. So let me get my food right. And all I did was concentrate on my nutrition and try to get it as dialed as possible. Beetroot was like through the roof. I was just only concentrating on nutrition, and it went really well for me over there. Probably one of my best Kalati climbs, and like dropping guys who were from the forces team and whatnot. And then I realized, like, oh my god, this I've done only on nutrition,
Hmm.
right? With minimal riding next to it. This is very powerful. So that's when a penny really dropped. And I think that what's happened over time is, we always say, right, and I'm sure you say this as a coach,
Right.
consistency is the most important thing,
Yeah.
right? In cycling, you need to be consistent. I have never managed to be consistent with my cycling, even though I say that to everybody that I mentor,
Right.
because of life,
Yeah.
right? I can't. Things get thrown at you. but I've maintained consistency with nutrition. So that's
Mm.
one place where today I don't fall off the wagon, right? I'm consistent with keeping my nutrition really good and healthy.
Yeah.
Um, and then my training kind of goes all over the place. And honestly, if I do well at a race, yes, I have trained for the race sometimes. I think I'm lucky sometimes. But it's really hard for me to be, I'm not going to give you an inspirational thing about, oh, I have all this work and yet I manage to be super focused with my training and I never miss a, that's not true. I do miss sessions. I hate missing sessions. I try to make up, but I don't take it too seriously because we are older guys now. The younger guys are doing, we have to have fun with what we're doing. Yes,
Yeah.
we like to race hard. Yes, we like to win. Yes, we like to beat the young guys. That's the biggest one, right? I'm
Yeah.
happy when I beat you. I'm happier when I beat one of the kids, right?
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
of the 20 something year olds, right? So all of that is fun, but when you lose, you lose, and there's no point getting too frustrated. I'm done with the days of like um, hardcore training and never missing a thing. It's not possible. It's
Yeah.
not possible anymore. So
Mm.
I think the balance of enjoyment and getting some results that keep you happy,
Yeah.
and most importantly, getting the joy of cycling mixed in, that's the
Mm.
balance that I look for.
Okay. So talking about nutrition, right? Expanding a little bit about that. Now you're mostly plant-based in nutrition, right? What is the kind of nutrition that goes on in a typical day for you, or in a day,
So,
training day or a race day? Yeah.
so the truth is that my training days and race and pre-race days are kind of similar, right?
Mhm.
It's just a really good diet, balanced diet every day. Of course, I will consume more before a race.
Mhm.
But yeah, my diet is 100% plant-based, and it's been that way for 4 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's changed everything for me. Like I've been able to get so much more results with so much less training just from the food, right? And honestly, I think that my best ever Nandi climbs and so on have been on this diet. I've
Mhm.
just been leaner, stronger somehow. I recover better. So the impact that it's had on me is huge. And a lot of the athletes that I'm working with, right? But so what is it that I typically eat? I eat a lot of raw food.
Mhm.
I eat a lot of salads. So typically my mornings, coffee, always coffee, right? I love my coffee. And then I'll eat like granola or muesli with fruits in it.
Mhm.
And if I'm training, that really keeps me going. I like to take homemade things on training rides, but I'm also very bad with eating on rides. My coach always gives me a hard time about that. I when I do carry something, it's like a homemade something. It'll be a
Mhm.
sandwich with. Now I use a lot of our HHM products. The Power Butters, Mega Mocha Power Butter. That's really an awesome training food.
Mhm.
Um, so I'll typically have a spoon of that if I'm heading out for a ride, and I'm good for the ride. It packs a lot of energy. Recovery, I'm very good about doing my smoothie after my ride. So again, I will have a smoothie that I make with bananas and a plant-based milk. So either a cashew or an oat milk, and I put our super greens in it. So we have a product called Lean Mean Super Greens, and it really helps accelerate the recovery.
Mhm.
um, so I'll have that, and I put a lot of fruit in there as well. And I don't eat. I just have that, right?
Mhm.
So I don't eat after the ride. And then when lunch comes, I eat a salad that's about that size. Okay,
Mhm.
so a ton of vegetables. I'm a huge believer in vegetables. So it's either a raw salad or mixed with sometimes cooked beans. Lots of tofu for the protein. So beans and tofu, mung sprouts, all sorts of different sprouts. I get a lot of protein from there. Um, Sometimes I might put some potatoes in if I want carbs. Sometimes I do, like I use a seed bread or a gluten-free bread, and I chop that up and I put it in the salad too. Like all of this stuff is on my Instagram. If anybody's interested, you can take a look there. So it's a huge salad. And dinner is usually not too big, but again, my carbs, I like to get them from potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, but like, the red rice, the Kerala type rice, the fat one.
Yeah.
Those are usually where I get my carbs from. Um, and it works wonders for me. And when I ride to drink, I usually do a mixture of salt and jaggery and nimbu with water. And
Hmm.
that works pretty well for me. I don't use too many of the electrolyte. I mean, I have also coconut water and sugarcane juice. I don't use too much of the electrolytes because there are a lot of good ones available today on the market in India. But I don't feel that the riding that I do justifies using those.
Okay.
I'm not doing those kind of hours.
Right.
Um, I know guys who are out there doing 6 hour sessions. Yeah, you better get
Yeah.
all of the electrolytes in. But I'm good with what I eat
Yeah.
because I don't do insane volumes of training. And the racing that I do now, it's like either time trialing,
Yeah.
right? Which is what we're there for an hour of effort,
Yeah.
or it's mountain bike racing, about an hour of effort as well.
Yeah.
So usually I manage with this diet. I'm not there for 6 hours.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. That really gives you a nice idea about. You mentioned a lot of ingredients that people can work with. So
Yeah.
that's great. So
If we ever do a session on that, I can expand a lot more on it.
I will. I will. We
Yeah.
will have a podcast episode. Just focusing on nutrition. I would love that.
So,
Yeah. So, but to end this session, what are some of the tips that you would give working athletes to do well in sport while doing well with work and life?
so I think, and I'm sure this is probably a really obvious answer, but I think that the the trick is to find that balance. The moment it's out of balance, it's not going to work. Something is going to suffer, right? And you can't let your family life suffer. You can't let your professional life suffer. Um, and working athletes got to remember that I'm going to say that most of us are not going to become world champion. Most of us are not going to become national champion. Yes, maybe, national champion. Yes, maybe. But um, our life is basically going to be sustained in the long run by our work. So
Yeah.
it's super important, and you have to find a way that your work supports the cycling, and that the cycling and the training that you do supports the work. It gives you a release. It makes you more focused because you're putting in those efforts. All of us need to do sport, otherwise we feel like shit, right? But we have to remember not to forget the other stuff and go completely off balance, because then everything will come crumbling down, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of like you have these building blocks and it's got to stay as a pyramid. If
Yeah.
you one piece is too big, it's going to tip that way. One piece is too small, it's going to tip this way. So it's really about finding that balance. And I think that one thing that I've learned is to not take the cycling too seriously for myself as a cyclist. I've taken it very seriously, but that's been because of my goals in cycling, which has involved other people, right? So when it's been my team, when it's been somebody that I'm mentoring or whatever, I take it extremely seriously. When I look at myself, you know, um, I have to remember it's just me who's doing
Yeah.
something that I love doing, you
Yeah.
know. So don't take it too seriously. When you win, you win. When you lose, you lose, right? Be
Yeah.
happy for the person that won and come back next time. It's okay. Um, and also, don't get frustrated by not being able to train as much as the other guys. Because what happens is that we get so mentally screwed. You're on Instagram, you're on Facebook. Oh my God, Venky's done 6 hours. How am I going to race against him, next weekend? Oh, he's been doing 6 hour days every. That's just going to mess with you, right?
Yeah.
You do what you can do, forget about the others, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes people will train more than you and they will win. Sometimes they'll train more than you and you will win. And all of this happens. So don't worry about it. Just look at your own balance, what is available, and try to enjoy that the best
Yeah.
that you can. Don't feel put down by what other people are doing, because if you're a dedicated athlete and that's all you're doing, it's completely different. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
um, that's all you need to think about largely, and you have other people also thinking for you. When you are in a job and with the family and this and that, it's very easy for us to fall into that trap where we it's almost like our whole world is cycling, but we can't let that happen.
That's true.
It's the hobby,
Yeah.
but be serious and work hard at your hobby, but remember that it's your hobby.
Yeah.
Right? And you have people who are working athletes who achieve very, very, very high levels, right?
Yeah.
But yet they have a balance. They have to have that balance. So many triathletes is like that. At the top of the world podium, so many triathletes are still working people, right?
True.
But it's balance.
Yeah. Man, awesome. This has been a fantastic session with you, and thank you for taking the time out and sharing your amazing journey with the Working Athlete podcast. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure I'm going to do an episode just on nutrition very soon with you.
Thanks for having me, Venki. I think that maybe we need to do one of these Venki's Working Athlete podcasts where I interview you, because you have a crazy story as well, and you're always asking the questions, and maybe people don't realize what your story is. So maybe one day we'll have to invert roles and I'll ask all the questions on your show.
Sure. Definitely.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Venki.